Joey, only Caribbean Weather Dude here with a bunch of stories about the weather this week. It's going to stay dry in BC. There will be a bit of rain moving through on Tuesday, but we are looking at drought conditions continuing. And of course, as we come into the weekend, the possibility of wildfires waking up and going for a run some more. So we are not out of fire season yet. I've been preaching that here on this channel because it's the truth. So rain is coming Tuesday on Avalanche Canada. It's reporting an impulse will move over the southern interior, bringing variable clouds and isolated showers. Most precipitation will linger along the coastline with a risk of thunderstorms from Dease Lake down to Quesnel. Confidence low on that. By work week Wednesday night, a low streaming over Fort Liard will bring strong westerly winds to northeastern BC, which poses a risk for elevated wildfire behavior. Alternatively, an offshore ridge will begin its building blocks over the remaining province, bringing drier air with temperatures only slightly above seasonal Wednesday through Friday. Extreme northwestern BC will remain the exception, with the systems riding through the Gulf of Alaska into the Panhandle, then through northwestern BC towards the Yukon. Looking at fire danger today across Canada, as you can see, definitely still very dry in the Northwest Territories and southern Alberta, southern Saskatchewan, and then we got this large belt through northern British Columbia that's still very dry. And what's going to happen is we're going to see that drying increase this week. Fine fuels in southern BC, very, very dry. Duff moisture code shows most of the province experiencing drought conditions. In the drought code, we see that extends across pretty much Western Canada. I mean, this is a notable weather story. Widespread drought. And why do you think there's been so much wildfire this year? Well, this is the map that tells it all. We've watched this drought code expand wider and wider and wider until it's hit extreme across almost everywhere west of Ontario. And the buildup index for today shows a lot of BC still very, very much at risk for fire behavior. If we go to ArcGIS, we can look at hot spots. So we still see lots of active fires. Vancouver Island seems to have a few patches that are burning pretty good. Nothing really close to civilization though. We got some in the North Shore Mountains, up the Coast Mountains. Some in around Lytton. We see there's still some active hot areas in that fire around Kelowna. Although I think a lot of the fuel in between there and Kelowna has burnt up. So they're probably not so much risks anymore, despite the fact you will see them probably stand up and behave this weekend like fires do when it gets hot out. Same goes for areas around Adams Lake. Definitely some hot areas on the edges of the fire still out there. For the most part, a lot of that's now well in the distance, and a lot of the fuel that was there between there and communities burnt itself off in the August 17th to 18th blow-up days. It's really when you start getting near Prince George, near that latitude, and you start looking west, south of Vanderhoof, south of Burns Lake, we see some pretty big fires out there. Pretty big fires. Look at this guy here, south of Carp Lake, Great Beaver Lake. That fire is very active, lots of heat there. It's burning up through into the Omineka Provincial Park areas. So those are areas west of Williston Lake, the Rocky Mountain Trench there, and still areas up in northeastern BC that are burning and will continue to do so into the winter. Here's looking at earth.nullschool.net, and this is looking at jet stream right now. We see what the jet stream is, mostly pushing well to the north, right? And this is why this area here in Alaska and sort of the northeastern or northwestern part of BC has been getting a lot of precipitation from this low that's been kind of stationed off there in the Gulf of Alaska. So we're getting some of that slapping in over the next few days along the coastal BC. Some of that will break into the interior, and we can deduce from these temperatures after 1 o'clock. It's after 1 o'clock in the afternoon here on Monday, the 11th of September, that I'm making this video. So you can definitely see why where this low has been stationed, how it's impacting Alaska. Crazy amounts of precipitation they've been getting up there, snow in the big mountains. But you see Alberta up into the Northwest Territories still riding this jet. Very, very, very warm air up there. And that south of us, I mean, look at the United States right now. It is still baking hot in a lot of the USA. 34 degrees, 32s, 32s. 34s, and I'm listening to American forecasters, and they're talking about how this is unusually hot still for them in many of those places. Article on the Weather Network today says drought a sleeping giant of a natural disaster, and that says BC's emergency minister. A couple notable quotes here. More than 80% of BC's water basins are experiencing level 4 or 5 drought conditions, meaning ecological and economic damage are almost likely certain. It is unlike any kind of drought conditions the province has ever faced, and in my opinion, truly a sleeping giant of a natural disaster that we are challenged with right now, said Emergency Preparedness Minister Bowen Ma on Thursday. The impacts will be very, very real. Climate change is a key driver of historic dry conditions, setting records for the driest summers many British Columbia communities have ever seen, says Environment Canada. The BC Wildfire Service says wildfires burned up more than 22,000 square kilometers of land across BC since April 1st. These numbers are astronomical. It's been a relentless fire season, which has been compounded by severe drought and the impact of climate change. Drought and fire go together. It's a double whammy effect, says Jonas Alila, a forestry professor at the University of British Columbia. Drought kills vegetation and leaves soil exposed and hardened, with no root systems to help the soil absorb water when rain falls. When fires do burn, they capitalize on drought conditions as dried plants and fuel, leaving parched soil even more water repellent than before. That's why we had increased flooding in 2021 with the deadly heat dome that set off crazy amounts of drought and burnt up lots of ground, but then what made the soils unable to absorb the heavy water that came through when we had the dreaded atmospheric river. Tofino on Vancouver Island's west coast received 100 millimeters of rain since May 1st, about 75% less than the usual 456 millimeters at this time of year, says Kat Thomas, prompting stage 3 water restrictions. So we look at humidity, Monday 2 p.m., where is it really dry? 32%. And higher up in the Peace Country, or in lower in places. Most of the central interior, pretty good, up in the 70s. Bit of precipitation this morning. Southern interior still pretty dry, 37% at 2 p.m., 33%. But all in all, today is the less active fire day, as will be Tuesday. You look at 3 p.m. on Tuesday, humidity values a little bit higher, with the exception of the extreme northeastern parts of BC. It's really Wednesday that we begin to see that high potentially, or Thursday. One or the other, that high is going to really start to settle in and build into BC. And that's where we're going to see humidity levels start to drop across the province, and dry air, especially up in the Fort St. John area, the Peace. We're going to see some really windy conditions there getting in later into the week. So with that dry, humid air, very windy conditions, I'm expecting fires to really go for a run up there, especially coming into the weekend. Humidex values at the height of the day on Thursday, 4 p.m. We start to see some mid to low 30s through great stretches of the interior. Friday, 4 p.m., we begin to see crossover conditions likely, which should increase fire behavior. Saturday at 4 p.m., very dry air in the interior, very dry up in the fort. Rain accumulation this week, next 24 hours, we're looking along the north coast up into Alaska. There's that big low I've been talking about. Over the next 3 days, that big low is going to slap along the coast of British Columbia as it counterclockwise. That's what low does. Next 5 days, still not much for rain in the interior BC. Certainly some large numbers up by Telegraph Creek into the Coast Mountains up there. Certainly in the Coast Mountains, south of Terrace. As we look at the next 10 days, not really much relief from these drought conditions. And we look at Friday, Icon model shows BC being pretty warm. Prince George 26, 27 at 6 p.m. So pretty warm day. Icon model says one thing. ECMWF has that more concentrated. ECMWF is usually more conservative, which is why I like to rely on it. But even ECMWF has that temperature rising north. And by Saturday, Kamloops, Kelowna, probably in the 30s. GFS has that widened out a little bit. So some different kind of predictions, but definitely dry air and warmer air is coming into BC. That's what's going to happen. On the Aurora front, things pretty quiet there. So there's that. However, there is Comet Nishimura that's going by tonight, Tuesday, the 11th of September. If you missed this one, don't worry. But it's going to go around the sun, and by October 13th and 20th, we're probably going to get a chance to see it again. So keep your eyes near Venus tonight if you want to see Comet Nishimura. Should be a little green streak in the sky. So anyways, that's some fire weather forecast looking ahead. In the next 10 days, not much for rain in the interior of British Columbia. We're in it still. It's not going to go away quite yet. If you find these videos helpful, please subscribe to the channel. I'd really appreciate that, because this is what I love to do. Take care out there and be good to each other.